Hello, and thank you for joining our webinar on the importance of biophilic design. My name is Jennifer Zumbrun, and I am the Marketing and Product Manager for Oli Creative. I will be your moderator for today's webinar. We received so many great questions from you during the registration, and we are excited about this conversation today. At Oli Creative, we leverage creative design and technology to provide impactful printed products that achieve privacy and influence while creating comfortable, healing, and memorable spaces. I'm excited to introduce our panelists. They are experts in the field of biophilic design, each bringing a unique specialty to the conversation. Isaac Holman is a Senior Interior Design Manager with ESA in Nashville. He is recognized for his work in utilizing biophilic design for healthcare. Casey Riley is CMO with the Fat Plant Society in Kansas City, specializing in the physical implementation of biophilic design using plants. And Larry Emerson is the environmental photographer with The Art Around You in St. Louis, specializing in the visual implementation of biophilic design by using stunning images. Thank you all so much for joining us. We're so excited to learn from you today. Production of this webinar is made possible by Gunnar Hood. Gunnar is with WSI Marketing and has been helping Oli Creative with our marketing efforts and helping us nurture relationships and develop stories for almost 3 years. Right now, I'm going to turn it over to Gunnar so he can discuss some technical details and tell us how the Q&A portion of the webinar will work. Gunnar?
Hey, thanks so much, Jennifer. And again, welcome to everybody. Thank you for being here. I'm sure many of you have been on various webinars in the past, so some of these housekeeping items are familiar. All of our lines are currently muted. We do ask that you use the Q&A feature to submit questions. And there's a kind of cool element to this one you may not have used before. You'll find the Q&A feature located on the bottom of your screen. And if you just click that, it'll open a separate panel. You can type in your question. As questions flow in, and you can ask these at any time during the webinar, you have the opportunity to hit the thumbs up button on a question that somebody else has asked, and that helps vote that to the top. This way, our panelists, when we get to the Q&A session, will have the opportunity to address the questions that are on most people's minds right off the bat, and we'll get through as many of those as possible. We are recording the webinar. We will be sending out a link to the webinar recording for anybody to access after the fact. And if for some odd reason you do experience a drop in audio quality during the session, we have a couple of suggestions. Either just wait a moment, it usually restores itself, or you can toggle back and forth on the audio options to go to the phone and then back to computer mode. And if for some odd reason that still doesn't work, in your invitation, there were instructions for you to dial in if you want to do that. And that usually is a great backup option. So that's pretty much just the overview of some of the things happening here. Before I turn it back over to Jen, I'd like to just share a really quick video with you about some things about Oli Creative. Bear with me a second. And here we go. And thank you for your attention. Jen, it's all yours.
Thanks, Gunnar. Hi, Isaac. How are you doing?
I'm great. How are you, Jennifer?
Good. Could you start off by telling us what biophilic design is and why you think it's important?
Absolutely. So thank you, first of all, Jennifer and Oli Creative, for this opportunity to share, and hopefully I'll learn some things too today. I'm really excited to be here. But biophilic design is really, I guess, in the history of humanity, it's really a relatively new term. It was kind of coined in the 1960s. We probably could do a whole nother webinar just about the history of biophilia, but it's been around since the 60s, and it's really a hypothesis that humans have this innate need to connect with nature. And
Absolutely.
I think we definitely know that, but again, it is that hypothesis. So I think it is very important. I am pretty much a 100% healthcare designer here at ESA, and we know the benefits of connecting with nature. And I did some research. The EPA earlier this year has said that we're about at 87% of our time being spent indoors, and it might be even higher than that now with COVID, obviously. So I think that that desire to connect with nature has always been important, but now we're really understanding the benefits of being able to connect with nature.
Yeah, absolutely. COVID's really put that all into perspective for all of us.
Exactly.
Casey, hi. Thanks for
Hi.
joining us today. What do you feel are the long-term benefits of biophilic images and moss panels that you create?
We talk so often about the five senses, and some people even go so far as to talk about the sixth sense, but in actuality, we have 30 senses. So as human beings, we're taking in so much more information and so much more than we are aware of at any given moment. I refer often to a couple of different theories because I think they're particularly applicable to the work life, whether it's, you know, WFH, working from home, or working in an office space. We know that our lives are being interrupted on a regular basis by any number of things, whether it's the telephone notification on your phone. So I feel that that's where attention restoration theory really comes into play. Kaplan created this theory back, I want to say it was 1980 proper. And the notion is that it's vital for our brains to be able to refocus our attention throughout the day. So the notion is that being able to look up at an image of nature or at nature itself enables us to restore our attention and refocus. There's also the theory of prospect and refuge that nature can provide.
Yes.
We talk so often, and Isaac, I'm sure you've got a lot of examples of clients wanting to implement windows so that they can look out, and that defines prospect. But we also need refuge. I've got my refuge right here. I'm sort of protected on all sides by moss. So it takes really just about 40 seconds for us to respond to nature when it's in the space. In fact, the American Psychological Association completed a study that said having greenery in a space actually increases feelings of well-being by up to 40%. So I think it's safe to say that we're all interested in as much well-being as we can get at this point in time.
Yeah, thank you. I agree. Hi, Larry. Thanks again for joining us today. There's evidence-based research that supports the advantages of large-scale artwork. Can you talk about that for a minute and what it takes to produce large images and the benefits that they offer?
Sure. Well, I think we speak of visual language. You know, not all languages use words. Some use visuals. I'm a big believer in that. I also think that the heart absorbs and has information for us that our brain doesn't see sometimes, which is really nice. Something with the heart. And as far as the production end of it is great stuff in, great stuff out. I mean, I've worked with a lot of interior designers and architects around the country, and a lot of it can be pinned down to production. But the benefits are numerous. It's for the patients, the staff, the visitors. If it's in a corporate area, it's the employees and the visitors there as well. So, like everybody, I think everyone agrees that it is bringing the outdoors in is important to all of us now.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Isaac, what do you think it takes to achieve biophilic design?
No, that's a really good question. I think there has been a perception that you can just stick some plants in a corner and you've got biophilic design. But I really think as designers, it's all encompassing, just like, any kind of project, you have to take everything into consideration. I think primarily the views to nature are super important, no matter what market segment you're designing, whether it's healthcare, hospitality, corporate, education. I remember one of my elementary schools had every classroom had one window way up high, just one window in every room. It was built in the 70s during that very super modern era. And yes, we went outside for recess, but I've wondered sometimes about the long-term effects of 3 years in a building, 8 hours a day with one window that we couldn't even see outside. So I think that's critical, but also lighting. I think that's probably the second most important thing for me personally as a designer, because obviously, you know, people are in spaces at nighttime, or we have healthcare workers that are on shifts that are opposite the natural body rhythm, circadian rhythm. So what can we do with lighting to help minimize those effects of being off schedule? But then the finishes obviously play a great role. And I'm so thankful to be designing today with all the technology and the digital printing, digital, you know, means of production that can help bring some of those natural looking elements into a room without being actual, you know, from nature. And then obviously artwork and plants are super important. I think those are some of the things we naturally think about first, and they are very, very beneficial. Just the science behind plants and the exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide is super important when we're inside, you know, 87 to 90% of the time.
Yeah. What a huge opportunity it is right now for designers to help with healing in different spaces. It's just really awesome.
Absolutely.
Casey, could you expand a little bit on the sustainability of your green wall design?
Absolutely. We always say at the Fat Plant Society that we love all things green, and we do. And we absolutely love living plant walls, and we've studied them, and they're absolutely fantastic. But one of the things that we do advise our clients to keep in mind, especially as it applies to a living plant wall, is maintenance and a maintenance budget. So obviously, with regard to a living plant wall, that plant wall is going to require water. And sometimes it requires a rather extensive watering system. If it doesn't, I've also seen units that can pull off plants and water them manually, but it does require water. When we founded the Fat Plant Society, we wanted to focus on sustainable plants and sustainable greenery, which is why we focused on succulents and moss. And the nice thing about moss is that it does not require any watering or misting. It's absorbing volatile organic compounds in the air. It's regulating humidity in the space. It's absorbing noise. And so it's actually an acoustic product as well. But it's essentially a one-time investment, whereas a living plant wall often requires some expense. We did a project for Weston, and Weston has a beautiful, glorious plant wall. It's also got a beautiful waterfall, and they also had plant walls in the lobby. But what they found is that they were spending $1,000 a month in maintaining those plants in the lobby. So they opted to move to moss. And I bring that up because I feel that the Weston has done such a superior job of managing their budget effectively and mixing both moss itself and living plants. So obviously there's still living plants in the lobby and there's still gorgeous space, but it is a wonderful and effective combination that now is more aligned with their budget.
Great. Larry, we talked a little bit about large scale artwork. What do you want people to know about image resolution, image size, and scaling large artwork? Can you talk to us about that?
All I want for Christmas is people to understand there's JPEG files and there's TIFF files. You want TIFF files, TIFF, which stands for, and I had to look it up, tagged image file format. JPEG is even funnier. It's Joint Photographic Experts Group. Don't know why, but that's what it's called. So first of all is the images that you're getting from your stock photo or your photographer. I'm dealing in photography, obviously. So you want the photographer to have a really high megapixel camera, a minimum of say 50 megapixels. Then you want to have files that are at least 200 megabytes. I might have confused those, but it doesn't matter. It's all mega. And you want to make sure, again, that they're TIFF, that when you get the file, because if you use a JPEG, every time someone takes it and moves it into another software, it's going to lose a little bit. With TIFFs will stay the same. That's really my best, well, except when people take a horizontal image, that is a full format, and then they want to take a section of it and make a long vertical out of it. That cuts into the resolution tremendously. You just have to be careful, and you need to plan ahead.
Yeah, thank you. I think planning really is an essential part of it, for sure.
Yeah.
Isaac, can you tell us how biophilic and evidence-based design can have a positive impact on patient outcomes and how it creates better workspaces?
Yeah, absolutely. So the good thing with evidence-based design, where biophilia, I said earlier, was a hypothesis, evidence-based design obviously is research-based. I'm actually studying right now to be an EDAC professional, take that exam later this month, and I'm super excited just to get into that research and really learn that it is science-based. This is not just some theory. But here at ESA, we totally believe in the evidence-based design concept, especially with as much healthcare as we do. But the cool thing is it's spilled into our other segments as well. But as far as patient outcomes, we know that exposure to daylight is super important when it comes to healing. We know the types of finishes we use. But as tying biophilia into evidence-based design, we know that bringing those elements, those natural elements into patient areas is super important. The lighting, as I mentioned earlier, but the artwork, sometimes we don't always have tremendous art budgets, and we have to be really creative about how can we provide healing artwork, a pleasant experience for the patient. And I want to just say really quickly too, we've kind of evolved from just patient outcomes to staff outcomes, family outcomes, visitor outcomes. Hospitals are not just places where we go when we're sick. A lot of our clients have community spaces. They want to be part of the community. They want the community to feel like they can trust them. And so they'll have, we have large conference centers. And I think again, the views to nature, we've even incorporated a lot of sound systems with healing music or soft, I call it like the spa experience. And even the food, incorporating gardens into our healthcare campuses, where patients, if they're well enough, can help, participate in the growing of those plants that can be used in their own meals. So it's really, to me, it's a really exciting time to tie in evidence-based design and biophilia with our healthcare clients.
Yeah. Oh, wow, that's really great. Thank you for sharing that.
Sure.
Casey, why should your clients consider incorporating this? Biophilic design sometimes comes across as extra and risks the possibility of being VE'd. How do you encourage your clients to keep biophilic design in their budget?
Return on investment, and that we see that in so many different areas. First of all, we feel so terribly fortunate to have experienced an uptick in business since the pandemic began. That was something I certainly could not have predicted, but as it turns out, as this webinar addresses, the importance of biophilic design and how we feel in our spaces is top of mind for everybody. So we feel very, very fortunate to have seen this uptick. But the return on investment can be seen in so many different ways. The first would be reduce sick days. And actually got a couple of articles that are referenced on the Fat Plant Society blog that employers, by implementing greenery in a space, they can save up to $3,000 per year per employee in reduced sick time. We also see evidence-based increases in productivity and in mood. I'm going to go so far as to say I think at least maybe 7 out of 10 people might have called in sick to work at some point, more for mental reasons than for physical reasons. We've all done it. And the idea, of course, is biophilic design really improves the way that you feel when you enter the space. And that will also apply to hiring and recruiting. We know that millennials and younger are absolutely looking for a work environment that is positive, that feels inclusive, that is modern, and offers, you know, certainly some amenities, but it feels good. And I think greenery is an indicator that the employer gives a great deal of care into the design that they create for not only their staff, but for their guests and potential clients as well.
Yeah, thank you so much. Larry, what is the first thing I should do if I have a project that's, you know, weeks, months out, maybe years out, and I need to incorporate biophilic images?
I think the first thing is, if the budget allows, hire a photographer, maybe me, maybe not, but who can shoot in high res. And I've done this before, where shoot the region where the facility is, and try and catch it at different times of the year. The regional photography has gone off the chart as far as people want that. You know, you could photograph I photographed a plant at a facility, and I didn't like the image that much. So I said, I can get another one and shoot it. They go, no, it has to be that plant. I mean, that's how specific people are about it. The other thing would be important to do with photography is if you want to shoot panoramics, because panoramics are semi-difficult to do because you need to do stitching, it's called. So you would take a shot, you have to use a tripod, you know, move the camera a little bit, move it again, and then software stitches this together so it gives you the resolution. So it can go very large then.
Yeah.
But it's planning ahead, and hopefully there are budgets. If not, then, you know, you just have to go with stock or whatever the photographers have.
Okay, thank you. So Isaac, do you approach design differently for healthcare versus corporate or education? And what are some strategies you use to achieve this?
So yeah, those are very different segments of design. But I think at the end of the day, you know, as far as Biophilia, we're trying to promote that connection to nature. So I think the end goal is the same, but the strategies are different. With healthcare, obviously we have the patients, but we also have the staff, the, you know, physicians, nurses, all the people that are administrating medical care. And then you have the families and the visitors. So you have lots of different people that you're catering to. But one thing, obviously with every project, but in healthcare, since that's more my area, the end user groups and even the focus groups, which bring in patients, former patients and community members, is super important. You know, a lot of times where we've been fortunate to build what we call a greenfield facility. So it's, you know, a brand new building on a site, and really bringing the community in to say, hey, we're not trying to interrupt, you know, your scene here. We want to enhance your community. And so tying in, you know, trails or ponds or lakes, how can we incorporate nature onto the site a little bit more, not just plop a building down, but and I think that can go for corporate or education. Obviously in the corporate world, you're dealing with workers, you know, they're 9 to 5 typically, or pre-COVID at least. Here at ESA, we moved into a new building 5.5 years ago, and we have a 360-degree floor to ceiling, wall to wall view of Nashville. And personally, like, that helped my productivity tremendously. You know, I can sit at my desk, but I can still see out any way I look. And so I think, you know, that's a strategy for corporate, is just really taking care of the people that are working, and what can you do to, you know, bring that outside in, because we can't always go on breaks as much as we'd like to, you know, take a walk or a jog. That's not always possible. Weather obviously is another factor. So that's how we would approach corporate. And education, like I mentioned, my experience as a child, you know, that's such a critical, learning is such a critical opportunity. And you may be in the classroom for, you know, hours at a time without a break. And I know I think the thought process was, you know, we don't want students to be distracted by the outdoors, but I think we're now seeing the benefits of having that view, even if it's peripherally. You know, how can we bring the nature inside? I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I know, like with a lot of schools now, kids don't have a lot of time to go out and have recess, and just that visual light from outdoors and how you can bring that inside. I think that's really critical right now.
Exactly.
Thank you.
I also wanted to touch on the corporate stuff that I do, in that they really like to have some detail, especially if it's in a city where there's architectural details from older buildings, and yet the juxtaposition from the new, glass, chrome kind of things compared to, gargoyles, on buildings and things like that, and doing, a lot of macro kind of work, close-up work of just details. So it kind of, you take all the pieces of a city and create one, thought process about it, I think is really important and really beautiful at the same time.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, Larry. Casey, what are some things that we should avoid when I want to incorporate biophilic design on a limited budget? To your space?
It's a really, really good question. One of the first things that we often tell clients is don't ask nature to do what it doesn't do naturally. And one of the nice things about moss is that moss is quite accustomed to to growing vertically. We see that all over the place all the time. So to ask for a living plant to do something that it doesn't do naturally is going to be somewhat challenging, and it might result in some expenses, especially when we're dealing with interiors. The other thing that I'd like to say is that I think it's extremely important to take all the precautions necessary for patients in healthcare. So while moss is hypoallergenic, and we have the data and the information to back that up, introducing plants into a space bring soil, and plants often, especially if they don't have the appropriate ventilation, end up getting aphids and other small types of bugs and microbes. So I can speak specifically to a job that we turned down because we weren't 100% certain, and that was in an oncology ward. The oncology board they wanted to incorporate a moss wall over plants because the moss is hypoallergenic, and because we don't have to deal with soil. The moss is not living in dirt. It doesn't need a soil substrate. So in comparison, it's going to be safer, but that was a risk that we just really weren't willing to take. So my answer to that is that obviously the patient is first and foremost always. So ensuring that patients who are dealing with compromised immunity in any way, shape, or form, that's where I feel Larry's work becomes absolutely ideal. If there's a concern about immunity, if there's a concern that, even the microscopic tardigrade that may live in moss, even though it's hypoallergenic, if that's a concern at all, then the recommendation is to utilize imagery rather than plants or dirt, because again, dirt does bring a lot with it. So that's extremely important. And then of course, back to considering how that design is going to mesh and how it will withstand the test of time, as well as of course that maintenance budget that I mentioned earlier.
Okay. I see that we had a question pop up about artificial plants and the benefits that they might bring. Do you see any benefit in artificial plants, Casey?
That's such a broad category, and there are absolutely preserved plants. We see lots of moss designs with other moss companies and throughout the United States and throughout the world that are incorporating faux ferns and other types of faux plants. Because of the structure of those plants, they're really not going to offer the same types of benefits that moss will offer. So I can even watch that. Look at me. I just literally pulled a chunk off of this moss off to show you, and that moss is so incredibly porous. And so that's why moss is going to absorb those volatile organic compounds in the air. So it's going to absorb odors, actually unpleasant ones, but not retain them. It's going to dampen sound. That's a little bit more difficult to achieve when you think about what a fern looks like or what a fake philodendron looks like. It's just not, which is why, you know, we're just so terribly fond of moss. And the interesting thing about moss is that if I were to take this piece and put it outside and rinse it off, give it the right growing conditions, it will start to grow again. So even though it's hypoallergenic now, you can still put it back, and that's just the miracle of moss itself.
Yeah. Ah, great. Thank you for sharing that.
Great question.
So Larry, what's the best way to incorporate biophilic design on a limited budget when it comes to images?
Well, don't call me. Nah, kidding. I have to say, I love saying the Fat Plant Society. You know, it's, I don't know why, just the,
Thanks, Larry.
oh, sure. Your question, yes, is some of it's pretty obvious. It's size. If you make things smaller, they cost less to produce. The artist might get the same amount of money for it, but the other thing, you know, I don't have there's not a lot except, you know, that, and maybe having fewer people touch it, because you all know that you can have an architect and then go to an interior design firm and then go to an art consultant and then go to a photographer and then they have to go to a printer, and everyone's touching it and, you know, putting their mark on it, you know. So, and this is not a real, I didn't mean to do a plug for Oli, but, you know, they are one, you know, you guys have one source, like, you know, for the most part, as far as the production on it. So, you know, companies like yours would, I think, could save some money.
Yeah, absolutely.
Boom, 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 you know, going out there. And that's my answer.
Thank you for sharing that.
Okay.
So, question for you, Isaac. I love this question. What trends, if any, have you noticed in terms of what people want? Especially, has that changed because of COVID?
A great question. I think, I don't know if I would say it's a trend so much, but I really think in healthcare, bringing that hospitality feel, here at ESA, we've done that for years, but I think more and more healthcare clients are seeing the benefits of creating more home-like or hotel-like, I guess I should say, spaces. Just that warmth, you know, we've gone from healthcare being so sterile, or the perception that a hospital needs to be white, all white, and, you know, sleek and very, very clean looking. Obviously it does need to be clean, but as far as finishes and palettes and materials go, I think we've come back to that warmth, bringing in that warmth and bringing in those natural elements, even if it's wood look plastic laminate or wood look vinyl flooring. People respond very well to that. You know, I always say nobody wants to go to the hospital unless probably you're having a baby, and even that can be stressful. So I think that trend of the hospitality feel just helps kind of calm everyone down, you know, in those stressful situations. With COVID, I haven't really seen my personal clients here. I haven't seen any really changes. I think obviously we all acknowledge that it's here and it's something we're dealing with, but most of my clients are already looking past it. They don't want to be limited long-term by COVID. They are doing some things internally with waiting rooms and, you know, patient rooms, obviously, to keep everyone safe, but no one's really asking for anything different right now. They're just making those adjustments as needed.
Yeah, good. Thank you.
Sure.
Casey, what's the inspiration for your moss installations, and what's the process that you take in that?
The forest itself, really, nature itself. I realize that's not a terribly interesting answer, but we do try to keep the designs as close to nature as we can. My husband is Danish born and raised, so born and raised in Copenhagen. He brings to the Danish design principles is what he brings to the table. So things that have awfully clean lines, things that are going to be built to last, We seek timeless design, and while we're certainly no Arne Jacobsen or Paul Henningsen, the Danish designers, those are examples of timeless designs that even though they fit into mid-century modern categories, we see them being enmeshed in sort of other eclectic design styles, and they're quite timeless. So one of our goals is to, well, a key goal actually is to create designs that will stand the test of time and won't look dated in a few years. And you know, I'll be honest, you're not going to find driftwood in our work. You're not going to find probably a lot of external ferns or the faux plants that somebody asked about. And that's not to be critical of those designs, but we feel that it's the cleanliness of the green design and the adherence to nature itself that makes it timeless. And I came across a quote a couple of days ago from the poet Mary Oliver. She died. She just died last year. She said, "For me, the door to the woods is the door to the temple." And I just love that quote. It really resonated with me. And so the idea is not to recreate nature exactly inside, but to utilize the materials in a clean, simple, and timeless manner so that 10 years from now, it's not going to look, you know, odd or out of place. And that's, I think that's our hope collectively, you know, all of us that are involved in biophilic design, is we want that green around for the long term.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I know our attendees have some questions as well, so I want to leave you some time for that. I'll turn it over to Gunnar, see what kind of questions we might have from our attendees.
Yeah, thanks, Jen. Karen and I have been monitoring the question and answer queue, and we're also getting some in the chat room. I'm going to ask Karen. She thought a couple questions kind of blended together real nice. Karen, do you want to bring that question forward first? You may have to unmute yourself.
Sure, I just unmuted. Okay. Yeah, there were a couple of questions that were about related to moss, Casey. So this one's for you. The first one had to do with, I'm just scrolling back up here. A question was, do you get objections from ownership about green walls and healthcare for cleanliness and possible hidden growth of microbes? And I know you started to address that a little bit when you were talking about the oncology answer, but then there was another related question. Somebody had asked about maintenance, so I think you pretty much covered that. Maintenance of the boxes. I don't know if you need to kind of give us a little more information on that. And then I think there was one other, and then there was one other question that was related about infectious disease within the C19 environment. Are there advantages or disadvantages to install live ferns, moss, etc.? Could they trap infection versus aerosol contaminants? So I know that's quite a lot to unpack there. I apologize.
But I feel like I get it. I honestly do. Thank you, Karen. And I feel like I understand that. And I think that's a really valid question. And so we know that the virus, you know, COVID, does live on surfaces. So, you know, we look at that. But I guess my answer would be, moss is no more a concern than maybe your groceries, because it's we know that on surfaces it's going to have a limited lifespan. And what I'm dealing with here, and I'll even pull this up so I can show you what I have in my hand right now, is moss that has been preserved using a paraffin and glycerin process and a natural pigment. So that's why it's I don't like to say that it's preserved. I just don't like that word. I like the word dormant. It's been stopped in time, meaning it's neither living nor dead, but it is no more dangerous than a houseplant. It's not going to hold on to the virus any more than a houseplant or anything else would. And Larry, I see that you pulled up a project that we've been working on for a little while now, and it's a wonderful combination of minimizing the square footage of moss and still incorporating Larry's beautiful images of nature. We don't worry that moss itself will hold the virus or distribute the virus in any way. No more than, say, the groceries that you bring home or the mail that you bring in from the house. But that is a really valid question. And one of the things that we hope to do in the future is, as the world opens up again, is conduct additional testing in the safest of circumstances. But I hope that gets at the question. I hope that was helpful.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, hey, sorry. One last thing. I did see, I'm kind of glancing at the chat, but I'm not reading it in detail. With regard to cleaning, we do offer maintenance contracts, and we do offer cleaning of the moss. We've never had a request to do so. We do have an ongoing, but if you have an installation in your home, the compressed air that you use to clean your computer keyboard is the exact same thing that you would use to remove any dust that may accumulate on the moss. I've had this piece up for years. I'm not going to pretend that I am the most meticulous housekeeper in the world, and I've never had to utilize compressed air to clean it. And then obviously the concern would be, does that spread the virus into the air? No more than running a ceiling fan or a stationary fan.
Thank you.
Well, Jen, we've got a question that's been upvoted to the top. John initiated the question. It says, I believe that using curves, rounded edges, nature-based colors, and natural feeling tactile surfaces that feel nice to the touch are a great way to incorporate biophilic design. I think we've been off the mark for the last 10 years with all the cold, gray, hard, sharp corners and edges. What are your thoughts?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm biased.
Okay.
I'm with you 100%, sir. Again, referencing Danish design again. My husband and I, there's a sweet spot. Danish design, these clean, simple lines are wonderful, but that doesn't mean we have to relegate ourselves to a sort of robotic-like color palette. And I am extremely fond of color and the use of color, and I feel that I'm in complete agreement. It lends to a better experience all the way around. If one is dealing with a space that has these sharp edges and these, slate gray and whites, and I've even seen more than one building in Copenhagen that is completely white, introducing green plants are a nice way to soften those edges as well. So, that gets into stylistic decisions and personal taste, but I'm in complete agreement, sir.
I think especially in healthcare.
Yeah.
Oh, I was just going to say, I think in healthcare, we see the pendulum swing. I've been doing this for 18 years now, and I've seen it, swing from darks to lights to grays. And I think, it just takes time to realize what really is beneficial. And I do think those natural palettes are where we should land. And sometimes, you may, as a designer, you may get tired of it, or you may think it's boring. There's more I can do. But I really think, in healthcare particularly, you have to be so mindful of what those colors and what those materials how it can affect patient care and patient outcomes. And I totally agree with John about the corners. We do everything we can to soften edges. We really focus on transitions, corners, and protecting, our mission is to protect the health, safety, and welfare of everyone, the public. But in healthcare, you've got your patients and your families and your staff. So it's a really good point, John. We really need to pay attention to those details.
Yeah.
Jen, I want to mix in. Oh, Larry, go right ahead.
I was just going to say that a lot of production facilities now have these. I have no thumbs, so I know nothing about tools, but I do know that there's some really great, I think they're called routers. Someone can help me with this, that can create all different kinds of very smooth and flowing images. It doesn't have to be a rectangle or a square. Is that right?
It's true.
Yeah.
Larry, while we've got your attention, there was a question that also showed up from the registration. And the question was, when you do commissioned work, what are clients asking for? And has that changed in the last year?
Yes. I am not doing any commission work right now because I'm not traveling anywhere. So unless it's around here, Anyway, what the question was.
Yeah, when it comes to commissioned work, have you seen changes in what people ask for? And I guess if you take COVID out of the equation, is there kind of a trend?
The trend still is regional. I mean, people want it to be regional. They want it to be their stream, their waterfall, their ocean, their beach. It's just, and I'm pretty sure that I can show you a stream and you're not going to know where it is, but then I'd be lying. So I don't want to do that. That's the biggest thing, I think, is that, and that you need to know how the images are going to be used would really be help if it's a vertical or as horizontal. Because I mean, I think most people shoot horizontals, but in the past year or so, I mean, verticals have just taken over. I mean, I have a section on my website, it's called Very Vertical on it. I mean, just because people were asking for so many verticals. So again, it's communication, talking about what the needs are of the client, and budget and imagination are the only limits, unfortunately, or fortunately.
I'd like to pull Jen into the conversation as well, because we also had a question that came up in the registration process that asked, how is Oli Creative taking biophilic design to the next level? And can you give an example of an application in healthcare, specifically pediatrics?
Yeah, I'd love to answer that. So one way we've been using biophilic design at Oli Creative is through our Seek and Find positive distraction art collages. The collages have nature-inspired high-resolution images and 3D items that are in displayed clear boxes. The artwork engages the children in pediatric settings with interactive activity and encourages them to get ambulatory. The Seek and Find scavenger hunt game changes every day, so the children that have longer stays can look for something new every single time. The peds patients are given a card with 6 items for them to find and hidden in the artwork or the Lexan display boxes. And hundreds of items and images are chosen, and there are enough cards for the kids to get different combinations for weeks, giving them something to look forward to during a long hospital stay. The collages are installed at child height, and we can help with the selection of images, whether it be one of Larry's images or several Getty type images that we have, or images that you source from your clients to complement the theme and colors of a space to make it a fun and eye-catching display. We've used this type of artwork in senior living and rehab facilities as well. We've just had a lot of positive feedback from this, and just really to increase the well-being of the patients and families in those spaces. So just a great opportunity that we've had at Oli to just really emphasize our printing capabilities and our design process as well. Thank you for that question.
Thanks, Jen. I believe Karen's got the next question.
Yeah, thanks, Jen, for highlighting that project. That was a fun one that we worked on. We have a question here from Matthew to Isaac. When utilizing natural light via large windows, seeing the outside from inside, how do you balance seasonality with your interior design utilizing biophilia? I know, like here in Indiana where we're located, we have all 4 seasons. So, you do have beautiful summer trees, and then you've got snow, etc. So I think that's a great question.
That is a great question. I think personally, my approach, and maybe it's the way I was mentored, we want to stick with living. We want to bring life in. Yeah. So when it comes to artwork, especially, we tend to stay away from fall or autumn with, leaves dying. So we would tend to stick with the spring and summer if we were, bringing artwork of nature in. But I think it goes back to the overall palette, just kind of that spring summer palette with greens and blues. Obviously, you're going to have a blue sky year round unless it's cloudy, obviously, but just blues and greens just tend to work really, really well in healthcare settings. Also, I was just thinking, since you were talking about windows themselves, obviously the window treatments play a big role in our design too. We typically use a lot of light filtering shades, whether they're motorized or manual shades, which really gives patients and families and even staff greater control over the view and how much light is coming in, because obviously the sun is going to change angles, throughout the year. And keeping in mind infection control, we found that that's probably a great way to give the patients control, but also keep infection control at the forefront. I hope that answers the question. That's a great question.
Yeah, I think that does. And there was another question about infection control and just cleaning in the healthcare environment, but I think that's a pretty big answer. And I'm not sure if that question, it was Joanna Rogers posed it, if it was more related to the moss walls or artwork. And so I'm not really sure exactly pertaining to which aspect, but maybe you could address that really quickly, just in general.
The longer I've done this, we're seeing more and more EVS, which is environmental services and infection control people at our hospitals being brought in to our meetings. I think it's great. They're the ones that have to deal with, when we leave, they're the ones that have to deal with the ramifications of what we design. And so I've learned so much from those individuals, and just really hitting home in healthcare. You've got to keep, I try and keep things as simple and as clean. And I don't mean, I don't know how to describe it except just simple, not too fussy, not a whole lot of changes, not material changes. We like to just make it as easy as possible. They don't have a lot of time to clean in between patients, especially when you get into surgery. So the more we can do to just really help them with infection control, the better. Artwork, obviously you're going to be limited in some of those higher acuity areas, what you can do with artwork. But that's definitely, those are conversations that we do have every day with our clients.
Thank you. I think that's a good answer, to get EVS involved.
I'm going to make a super quick recommendation. There's a service that a lot of Kansas City restaurants and healthcare facilities have been using. It's called Proactive Protect. And it's the same nanotechnology that's used to coat medical implants before they're implanted in the body. And what that does is it protects the surface for 30 days utilizing this nanotechnology. It's essentially creating a little barrier. And obviously this is new. It's fresh to the pandemic, but that's something that I have seen some of our local healthcare facilities and a number of our local restaurants use to protect themselves for that 30-day period. Of course, the spraying needs to be done again, but in terms of fighting infection on surface, that struck me as an interesting product.
Okay, great. Gunnar, do you want to take the next question?
Yeah, so we've had a couple different questions come in related to acoustical attenuation when it comes to biophilic design and the importance. And I thought this might be something both Isaac, Casey, and Jennifer could respond to. Isaac, we'll start with you.
Sure. So acoustics are important no matter obviously what type of project. But in healthcare particularly, you have all of the privacy, with patient particulars about their situations. But I think as far as biophilia, there's some very creative ways. I'm just thinking off the top of my head, a lot of ceiling tile manufacturers have really expanded their offering and have come up with a lot of creative solutions where it's not just, a room full of 2x2 ceiling tile. There's acoustic clouds in all kinds of shapes and colors and sizes with trim pieces. You can really, the sky's really the limit these days. With the digital printing as well, you can still have acoustic properties behind the panels, but you get that look of nature or the sky, whatever kind of image you would like to have. And also, we do a lot of acoustic wall panels. We have a lot of hard surfaces, a lot of tile on the floor, chipboard walls painted. So we do a lot of wall applied acoustic panels. And obviously, again, with the digital printing, you get the benefits of any kind of image that you would like, but you get the acoustic benefits on the backside.
Yeah.
And I love that. I love that because there are, of course, a number of acoustic products. And Isaac, I'm sure you're very familiar. You know, when we deal with contractors and designers and architects here, there are so many products, and some of them have really great and fascinating stories. You know, meaning they're you know, recycled plastic or recycled other types of recycled materials. They are rather expensive per square foot. Interestingly enough, moss comes in at a lower price point per square foot. We did an installation last week, and I did a little decibel testing before the installation went up and after. And we went from, it happened to be in a space that had very, very tall ceilings, and we were installing about 16 panels onto a cinder block wall. We went from airport runway level sound to library conversation when the panels went up. And so that was kind of an interesting experiment for me. We will continue to do decibel testing sometimes, and actually in one of our very first installations, we installed the moss on foam core to add that extra acoustic protection. But again, I know that there are wonderful things. If I had to choose between some of the acoustic products that are out there versus, say, a beautiful photograph that happens to have the wonderful acoustic properties like Oli has, that Jennifer can speak to, it's not even a contest.
Oh, thanks, Casey. Yeah, we can definitely help with acoustical art panels. We have several pre-designed sizes. We also can do something completely custom, whether it be like a collage or a triptych or quadriptych, depending on how large of a piece that you would like for your space. But yes, we can definitely help with beautiful digital printing and utilize beautiful images as well.
I know we're just about out of time here, and we want to, you know, honor everybody's time. So Jen, I know that you just wanted to kind of wrap up by going around with the panelists and checking how people can get in touch with them.
Yep. Thanks, Gunnar. Thank you again so much, all of you, for joining us today. I hope you have some great takeaways and inspiration from our panelists for your next project. Our attendees may have questions for all of you, and what's the best way they can contact you after the webinar? Can you just go around and let me know what's the best way for each of you to be contacted?
Sure. The best way for me is email, and I'll spell it out. It's Isaac, HISAACH at ESARCH.com.
Thanks, Isaac.
Sure.
Casey?
I direct you to the fatplantsociety.com. We do have a contact form, and there's also a spec sheet that you can request. We'd be happy to send that. You can reach us at thefatplantsociety@gmail.com. And if you have a question, honestly, don't hesitate to call. Our phone numbers are all over all of our assets. Give us a follow on Instagram if you would, and if you like the work and you would like to learn more. But we never tire of talking about moss. So the phone, however old school it may be, the phone is always, phone calls are always welcome.
All right, great, thanks. And Larry, how about you?
Sure. theartaroundyou.com. 3 W's in the front. Or email, just take out the 3 W's and put Larry at theartaroundyou.com.
Great, thank you. If you want to reach out to me about a project or a question that you might have at Oli Creative, my email is jjzumbrun, ZUMBRUN @olicreative.com. Thank you again to all of you attendees and panelists for joining us today. It was truly a pleasure. We appreciate it. And we hope you all have a safe and wonderful holiday season. Thank you.